you're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm examining love bombing, what it is to be love bombed. Are you in a relationship where you're currently being love bombed by the other person? What does love bombing look like? And this is a very important thing to think about, because a lot of times when this is happening in our relationship, we are not aware. And so when we're able to understand what love bombing is and to understand what it actually looks like when it's happening, this can be very powerful. Because oftentimes when you're being love bombed, it feels so good. There's a lot of attention. The person is attentive to you, doing things for you, and it feels really good. And probably the previous relationship was very different, where maybe you felt like you didn't matter in the relationship. Maybe the person didn't seem to value how you feel. Maybe that person didn't give you things or wasn't there for you. And so it can seem very wonderful. It can be almost like a whirlwind romance. But we do need to discover, is this true love? I mean, is this real, or is this love bombing? In the beginning of any relationship, there's a honeymoon period, right? In the beginning of any relationship, there's this newness, there's this interest, there's this kind of whirlwind, right? I mean, because that's what human nature is about. When we first meet someone, it's so interesting and fun and new and exciting, and you kind of get rolled up in that, and you start feeling a certain way, and you're having fun, and there's a lot of excitement, and you know, we have to be able to separate that newness and that fun with love bombing. We also have to be able to separate that and understand, is this truly what this person feels like doing, or is there a reason behind what they are doing? Because oftentimes if someone feels insecure in a relationship, or is fearful that the other person is going to abandon them, or is fearful that the other person is not going to stroke their ego or be there for them, or making sure that that doesn't happen, love bombing could play a part. And the interesting part about this is that most people who are love bombing someone else usually do not really consciously aware of the fact that they are love bombing. And it's very interesting because we all have these tendencies, we have these programs that we deal with, we have these interactions, and sometimes we're very mindful of these things and sometimes we're not. So you might be in a relationship with somebody who is love bombing you. However, they don't even know that they're love bombing you. It's something that they do in every relationship to gain your trust, to pull you in very quickly, to basically disregard or pull or apart or break any boundaries that there are in the relationship to help to their advantage, but they might not necessarily even realize what they're doing. And so today's podcast is going to be very helpful to understand, what is love bombing and how do I see it and how can I recognize it if it's happening to me or someone I know. One of the interesting things that I find about love bombing is that it can actually mimic the look of a Hollywood film, right? So a lot of times in these romantic comedies or these romantic shows, you know, the person is giving them all these things and buying them things and taking them on whirlwind romances and, you know, traveling the world and all this stuff. And so it can mimic what would look like in a Hollywood show, in a film, in a big film. And so it's hard sometimes to realize that that's not really reality, right? And so in that situation, and you're thinking about it, when somebody is showering you with gifts and things like that, what happens? Usually the person that's getting showered with the gifts and that sort of thing is giving the other person quite a bit of attention, right? So they're talking about the person, they're there for them. And so it's interesting because also from the outside, when people see this happening, other people can focus on that couple. It'll get attention from other people. Also, some people get envious because they're like, wow, I always wanted a relationship like that. Wow, that person must be so lucky. And so, you know, the gift giving and the compliments and the validation. And it's interesting in that process. I mean, most of us are going to recognize the other person, reward the other person. And sometimes it can it can teeter, you know, from recognizing and rewarding to almost putting this person on a pedestal and kind of worshiping them to a certain degree. And it's interesting because I think a lot of folks don't realize that that's also part of the love bombing. Some of the common signs with love bombing is when people like to use the concept of soulmates, star-crossed, twin flames. So when we hear about the twin flame concept, that can also be love bombing, where the person's saying, oh, we're soulmates, we were meant to be together, oh, all these things, and kind of triangulating and showing how everything has a connection and trying to create that reality. And, I understand that some of us, I believe, are meant to communicate or spend some time with or have a relationship in this lifetime. But I do think to some degree as well that there's multiple people for multiple people. I don't think there's just one destined person out there, right? I do agree that we might have some work that we need to do with certain people and maybe some things to learn from and to grow from with certain people that we need to intersect with. But I do feel like people have the opportunity of being in multiple relationships, different people. But that soulmate concept, that twin flame concept, could be thrown around a lot in the beginning of a relationship. And what that does, especially if somebody really is love bombing you, is you begin to feel not only is the relationship like great and cool and wonderful, but this is starstruck. I mean, this is a big deal. This is like in the stars. This is written. This is something that's been written. And when you begin to think of things in that level, not to say that it doesn't ever exist, but to begin to think in that level, usually what happens is that we overlook some of the things that the other person's doing. We overlook some of their tendencies, right? We overlook some of what's happening, maybe some of the communication breakdowns we overlook because we say, oh, hey, we're stars. We're supposed to be this lover. We're connected. We're twin flames. We have this deeper meaning, which is interesting, but I think can get us off target sometimes in the beginning of a relationship and start seeing the relationship in different terms. Often when somebody is love bombing you, they don't have boundaries and they don't really want you to have any boundaries. And so one of the big wake-up calls when we think about love bombing is that oftentimes the boundaries that you might have had when you first met this person those boundaries seem to be gone. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you have boundaries on how often you see someone during the week, because you have a career, you have children, or you're dealing with something, and those boundaries can quickly be let go of because that person wants to see you every day. And so they're giving you gifts, they're reaching out, they're trying to take you to dinner every night, they're doing that type of thing, which can feel really good, but you can start breaking down your boundaries of, hey, I really need to focus on my work, and I've got to focus on my children and that sort of thing, and it can be challenging. Also, too, what can happen here as well is that they might want to push a commitment very early in the relationship. So maybe they want you to meet their parents very quickly. Maybe they want you to meet their children very quickly. And that could be a boundary as well. For example, you may be saying, hey, I really need to get to know you. And over a period of time, we can connect and I can get to know your family and that sort of thing at some point in time. But they might want to do that very quickly. And that can be a boundary for you, as well as maybe some public displays of affection, and also maybe some of the texting and calling. In the beginning, it can feel good that somebody cares. It can feel really good that somebody is messaging you and reaching out to you, which is wonderful. However, in the same breath, how often are they reaching out? Is it constant? What happens when you're unable to message back or text back? What kind of response do you get? How often are they calling you during the workday? And sometimes this can feel really good, but over time, some of the love bombing can be overwhelming. Also, it can create issues, right? Also, there could be some boundaries that you've created that are being, tossed aside because of this. And then you find yourself kind of placating or being there or giving into these things when in reality, this is kind of the slippery slope effect, right? And so a lot of times with love bombing, and the person is able to love bomb you, it's really challenging because, there's a question between, hey, I really like the attention, and then there's a question of, is this a healthy amount of attention? And is the reason why the person's doing this, is this healthy as well? A lot of people ask me, what's the difference between, love bombing and real love? And there's a lot of differences, right? Because when you're dealing with love bombing, you're dealing with someone that's showering you with things, and usually it's to be able to get you to respond a certain way. It can be also out of the fear of abandonment. It could also be to get you to you know, take care of them, or even be needy on them so that they end up having some more power over you. So the finances could be very well where they're taking care of you financially and you didn't have that before, and now you kind of rely upon them as well. So there can be that standpoint of, subconsciously they're doing these things, and then eventually you rely on them for certain things that you haven't had to rely on before with other people. And it's interesting. So, bottom line, when we're talking about the love bombing, we have to kind of see through it. We have to begin to see the differences, and we have to see some of the indications, because what happens here is that usually love bombing is around for a period of time, and then the person begins to pull that back, right? So over a period of time, the lavish gifts and those sort of things end up having a price, right? So there's a string attached, right? Which before it didn't seem like there was, and all of a sudden it's about what I've done for you. Also, that attention that they've had on you could start to wane, right? And so in the love bombing stage, it's like we can do no wrong. This person is looking up to us or taking care of us. It feels really good. But over a period of time, if it is love bombing and they begin to pull away, it's almost as if, you've been on this pedestal, lavish with gifts and taken care of, and all of a sudden, boom, you're pulled off that pedestal, right, for whatever you may have done. And sometimes when somebody is kind of detaching from the love bombing and maybe their true self is coming out, they begin to find a lot of fault in you. Maybe they find fault in you and your personality, your actions, what have you. And, they come back and retort that the reason why they're not doing X, Y, Z is because you're not being you, or you're not doing the right thing. And so as we talk through today's show, I'm going to give you some tips on understanding and recognizing love bombing, as well as being able to recognize that in the beginning of a relationship, because sometimes it's just so valuable, right? If we can understand something in the beginning of something. I mean, it's good to be able to learn the lesson, and it's good to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk. But sometimes it's good, if we've gone through this multiple times, to be able to see it coming a mile away so that you can see it, you can understand it, and we can learn from it quickly and be able to move on. So stay tuned. When I return, I'll be talking more about what love bombing looks like and the difference between true love and love bombing, and how to really understand that to safeguard yourself. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I've been talking about love bombing, what it looks like, what it means to be love bombed. Some of us don't realize that we are being love bombed. And love bombing, it can almost mask itself to having this whirlwind romance, right? And it can mask itself in that situation. But what I found in that love bombing usually is like when somebody is lavishing a romantic partner with huge gestures. And the interesting part about it is they tend to be in constant contact to really gain the consistency and the upper hand in the relationship. With the flattery and that type of connection. And a lot of times, too, when somebody is love bombing someone, it can feel really good, but they're kind of manipulating the situation, right? Because that person begins to feel that's being love bombed begins to feel like this other person is the perfect person for them, right? It's perfect. But there's a level to it, because it goes from being attention and flattery to what I consider excessive attention and flattery, right? So there can be an excessive amount. And that's it's in the very first dates, that's normal, right? Somebody's going to act a certain way or be a certain way. But there's a certain amount of attention that I think is healthy, right? And then there's a certain amount of attention that I think is overkill. And like I was talking about earlier in the podcast, I was talking about the concept of the soulmate concept, the twin flame. I've never met anybody that I feel so close to. You're everything that I've ever wanted. And you're the most amazing person on the planet, and I'm just so happy to be with you, and everything about you is amazing, and I've always wished for someone like you. that can feel really good in the moment, right? But the problem behind that is two things, right? So that's first alluding to the fact that the person is very much black and white, only seeing what they really want to see. Also, how do you live up to that and stay living up to that standard, right? And that's also kind of scary because it can be very hard because in the beginning, someone can appear perfect, right? In the beginning of any relationship, someone may appear perfect to that other person, but over time, they begin to devalue that person because they start seeing things about that person that they don't like, right? And that's where the love bombing is very interesting. And that's where the rubber meets the road is the devaluation, right? When somebody starts devaluating you, right? So it's like the devaluation changes. So, when you have the love bombing, at first you could do no wrong. You were the best person on the planet. You are their soulmate. You were the only person they can talk to about their whole life. But in the process, over time, one of the things we find out through love bombing, through that process, is that over time, you don't hold up to the measure anymore. Okay, and then they start finding problems with you. I've also realized that when people love bomb, they have a tendency of isolating that person. So, if you are a very close family person, like you have family that you spend time with, you have a lot of friends that you spend time with, there are people that you really spend time with in your life, and when you meet this person and you're going through this process, it's almost like you're kind of with them 24/7. There's like a whirlwind. It's kind of with them. There's not a lot of time to spend with other people. Maybe if you even bring up spending time with other people, they might, oh, let's go on a trip. Let's do this type of thing. And so there's that isolation from family and friends. And that can be challenging too, because it can be hard to see that if somebody wants to spend a lot of time with you. That's good. But also, there could be a level of how much time is healthy, right? And that's a big deal. How much time is healthy? And you have to really look at that and see that, because if the amount of time that you're spending time with this person is getting in the way of your responsibilities, your life responsibilities, this is a wake-up call. Okay, so if it's getting in the way of, taking care of your kids, taking care of your job, taking care of your pets, all those types of things, we have to really understand and see it, right? And we can't just kind of put that under the rug. And sometimes you can get wrapped up in this. You can get wrapped up in this love bombing. And it's interesting when I've talked to clients who have been love bombed and they didn't realize what was going on until all of a sudden something shifted. They went from having this whirlwind and amazing time to this person going from loving them and thinking that they're God's gift to, finding fault within them every day. And they're like, something really, really happened. It went from this and then slowly went downhill. I've also realized that I haven't seen my friends or family in a long period of time. And when I do bring it up, this person's finding issue with those people or brings up the fact that I need to be spending more time with them and very kind of excessive and overwhelming. Another thing that I find with love bombing as well is that there can be a tendency of materialistic type things, and we need to be aware of that. And giving gifts in itself is not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing, but it just depends on the excess and the level, right? Because it's interesting, because when somebody's giving you a lot of things and showering you with gifts, right, it's hard to really look through that. I mean, don't you think? I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been on this planet for a while, and I'm sure you have too. And some of us have, that's not something that you really got, And so if somebody starts showering you with gifts, it's very different. It's very new. It's something that you haven't experienced before. And then that in of itself can be such a new experience that it's hard to really see that as anything but, wow, this person really is, doing this for me, and that's amazing. But sometimes we have to look through it and make sure that the giving itself is giving for the idea and the concept of just giving because they want to, not because they want something from you, right? And sometimes when you're being given a lot of things all at one time, it can be hard to see that truth. And it can be hard to see the reasons behind that truth, right? So, and that can be something that, sometimes people just want to give, but if it's overwhelming and there's a lot going on, it can feel like a whirlwind. And I find that also when somebody's giving to give because of the goodness of their heart, that's one thing. But usually if somebody's giving to get something from you or to get you to act a certain way or to do a certain thing, that's also a red flag. Another thing, too, is that what happens when we're being love bombed, the difference between that and that being someone's way of life, right? So sometimes people are just kind of, that's how they are. They want to show you, how they feel. They want to shower you. They want to be there for you. They want to shower you with gifts or thoughtful things. It doesn't have to be lavish. It's just something that they thought about and they wanted to do something for you. That's great. And usually that last the test of time, right? So through time, that person's still going to always do that. They're still going to show that they care. They're still going to go that extra mile. But with the love bombing, what happens is this usually has a shelf life, right? A cutoff date. And that cutoff date can be very slow, right? So the cutoff date can kind of be a tapering where you don't really see it coming so much, right? So it's a tapering down. Sometimes it can be very quick. So sometimes the love bombing can really, stop on a dime, and all of a sudden there's problems with you. The person's bringing up your issues or the problems that they see with you or your personality or your attitude. And you begin to try to defend yourself in this process, defending whatever it is. Maybe, the fact that you want to hang out with your friends. Maybe the fact that you do have an ex-wife or ex-husband and you do have children from that marriage that you need to take care of, and it becomes a source of issue for this other person. Maybe you're not spending enough time with them and they feel like they don't have enough time. And that's another interesting indication, is that when somebody wants all of your time. And I find that over time that can be very challenging to see, because in the beginning it doesn't start off like that, right? So in the beginning, because of the love bombing, you want to spend as much time with them as possible, but then over a period of time, that person begins to find fault with you in the fact that you're not spending time with them, and they feel very alone, and they remind you of that. And so that can get in the way, like I was talking about earlier, of your responsibilities. And so they're needing more and more of your time, more and more of your focusing on them and giving them, that attention. And we all need attention, but there's a certain level of healthy attention or not. When I return, I'll be talking more about love bombing, more indications, and really how to see it, because a lot of times we don't see it, right? And that's why this all starts. And it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. Some relationships don't have to be romantic, where there is some love bombing. And, that can be where, you start working with somebody and, everything you do is great and everything you're doing is awesome and every project you're working on is amazing, and they go out of their way to do things and they go out of the way to take you to company dinners and all this stuff, and then eventually things change. There can also be love bombing in friendship relationships too, right? So it's not just romantic. And a lot of that time in those relationships, again, it goes back to the person doesn't want to be abandoned. It also goes back to that person wanting to look a certain way in front of other people. And if you're over there championing this person to other people and, telling about how great they are, that can also be a part of it too. A lot of times too, it can come down to insecurity, right? And so if the person's very insecure, and is needing reassurance, this is also an indication. And we'll talk more about that right when I return. So stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm discussing what it looks like when you're being love bombed. What are some of the indications that you're being love bombed, and knowing the difference between true love and love bombing. And right before the break, I was talking about the reasons why people have a tendency of love bombing, and that is, it doesn't always have to happen in only a romantic relationship. When I look back at some friendships a long time ago, when I was growing up, I remember some friendships that were like kind of whirlwind. They were whirlwind. It was like all this stuff happening at one time. somebody was like showering me with gifts and a lot of attention, and I could do no wrong. And not that I don't like that. I mean, there was a time when I really liked that. The problem is that I started realizing that that's just not based in reality, right? So it's like it felt good that I could do no wrong, but eventually what happens over time is, well, you can do wrong and you do wrong, and that person points it out, and then eventually you have to be careful, because if somebody is very extreme with the positive, negative, black and white thinking, you can be painted black very quickly, thrown off your pedestal very quickly, and the love bombing is over. And I was talking a little bit right before the break as well about the reasons why we do it, right? So a lot of times people don't even realize they do it. It's all subconscious. Sometimes this is just a pattern and programming that people have been programmed into throughout their entire lives and relationships, to get people to like them, to get people to be happy to be around them, to get people to be kind to them. Another indication, another reason why is sometimes it can be because they're insecure. They need reassurance. They need reassurance, so that insecurity. So they do this stuff also maybe to get that person to be needy on them. So if it's a financial situation, and this person starts giving them lavish gifts and taking care of them financially, right? It can get a person to become needy very quickly on this person. Maybe they stop working, or what have you, and then that other person becomes essential to their life, right? The other person becomes essential. The love bomber becomes essential to the life of the other person. Another reason why people love bomb is because there can be basically a worry and a self-esteem issue, right? So there's a self-esteem issue where the person will not be with them unless they do these things, and they feel like they have to do all these things all the time to keep that person liking them, to keep that person wanting them. And that does happen with a lot of people. A lot of folks have insecurity. A lot of people, think, okay, well, I'm going to have to do this to keep this person, because I need to keep them around, and they're not going to stay around unless I do this. And so that's a big deal, and that's something to be thought of as well. And so that can be a little different than the narcissist trying to love bomb you to get you to basically worship them and see their value and kiss their butt all the time. That can be from a different perspective. However, love bombing is love bombing because, again, if somebody is very insecure about who they are, eventually that insecurity is going to come through in what they do, right? And eventually their insecurity could have the potential of blowing up the relationship, right? With collateral damage. The fact that, they're in this relationship, they feel insecure, they start finding reasons to be insecure, they take that out on you. Collateral damage is just being around somebody with their own insecurities and how those insecurities can blow up something, whether it's a work relationship, a friendship, a romantic relationship, even a business deal. You've seen it where people go into business together and they partner up, and one person gets insecure about things or finds faults in themselves, and they're worried, and then they start they start being worried about the other person they're in business with. Maybe they start getting a little paranoid that this person is going to take something from them or hurt them, and then we have this deflection issue, where we start deflecting ourselves and thinking about them all the time in that situation. There's a lot of things that happen where we begin to put our own insecurities on that other person. And so, and then the next thing you know, the partnership is doomed and what have you, because the other person is believing these things about the other person based on their own insecurities and their own paranoia that they've created. So definitely, love bombing, for the most part, I believe, there's reasons for it. And sometimes the person doesn't even realize that they're doing it, right? Sometimes the person that is love bombing doesn't even realize that they're love bombing. That just might be the way of life that they've always dealt with things. That might be the way of life that they've always, had their relationships. And that's something that you want to really think about, because if we've always been in relationships like that, if that's how we've always interacted and acted, that is an indication that, either we've learned this, right? We've either learned this from watching our family dynamic. We've learned this from watching other people. Perhaps we learned this from mom and dad, in their situation and their connection together. All these things are very important. And that's why it's very powerful. Once we understand this stuff and we get to understand it, it's so powerful because then we can see it kind of coming a mile away. And so, love bombing, a lot of times you'll feel like you're on a pedestal, right? You'll feel like you're being put on this pedestal like a king or queen, and everything you do is great, and everything you've done is perfect, and you're the love of their life, and you're beautiful, and you're attractive, or you're handsome, or you're so intelligent, and everything's great. But as that begins to wane, the problem it does to the person that's being love bombed is that they usually don't realize they're being love bombed. Then they don't realize when the person starts acting differently, they start wondering why this is happening. Then they're in fear. Why is this person acting like this toward me? And then they try to get back on that pedestal that they didn't even know existed. They try to get that person to see their value again. They try to get that person to see what they have been talking about this whole time. Like, think about it. If you've gone from those extremes where it's gone from you are the best, you are the most amazing person on the planet to them having problems and faults with you, what are you going to do as a normal human being? You're going to try to get them to see your value. You're going to try to show them who you are. You're going to try to get back into good graces with them. And I found that as that begins to happen and the person is pushed off the pedestal, you can get back into good graces ever so often, but usually kind of the negative downturn lasts longer and longer each time. Now, if you're not knowing that you're being love bombed and you don't know that you've been on and off the pedestal, what happens is that when somebody pulls you off that pedestal and stops the love bombing process, you take it very personally. You're wondering, how can I get into it? How can I get back into those good graces? And sometimes this can be very subconscious as well, right? So we might not even be consciously aware that we're doing this. So maybe we start doing things for that person. We start, bending over backwards to help them. Perhaps we start giving them carte blanche. Perhaps we start placating them or accepting things about them that we might not normally accept. Perhaps we accept boundary violations that we normally wouldn't accept. Perhaps we accept comments that are kind of rude, but we don't call it out because, we just don't want to deal with that. And eventually we get back up to that pedestal, the love bombing continues, and then we lose it again, right? And so it becomes this pattern of the person's main objection, main concept and object, and is to be back into that feeling, right, of being taken care of being that one and only. And so sometimes that just doesn't ever come back. And that can really play, a real emotional and mental game on you because you're not realizing that this is love bombing. And also you feel like you've done something wrong. How do I change? How do I augment that? How do I go back to how it was before? And, from what I've seen in all the years that I've been working with clients, I haven't seen when it's really love bombing. Usually what happens is over a period of time, the love bombing, it feels good, and then it kind of wanes and comes back, but then over a period of time, eventually the love bombing stops. And then you're left there holding a relationship where you didn't really see the truth for so long because there was so much love bombing going on. There was so much happening all at one time. You didn't see the truth, right? You didn't see what was happening because it was a whirlwind. And so all of a sudden you start stepping back and you start wondering, what is it that I really have in my life? What's really, truly happening? Why is this happening? Why am I feeling this way? That sort of thing. And you begin to question a lot of things because quite honestly, you never really looked as deeply as you needed to into the relationship because it felt good at the time, right? It felt good. It felt different. There was some things that were coming out of it that you hadn't experienced. And so definitely this is a really big sign that you went through a stage of love bombing in the relationship. And it's interesting because, people will talk about a certain relationship where they'll say, oh, I've never been taken care of so much in my life. Or this person was so attentive to me. Or this person cared about my health and well-being so much. Maybe they were there when I needed them, or they took care of me and nobody had ever taken care of me before. And that's a big thing. When people take care of you, that's definitely something to think about. However, sometimes this can be love bombing, right? Sometimes it can be, I'm going to do all these things now. And, when somebody's doing all that stuff for you, that can be very mentally and emotionally manipulative to some degree when it's not being done out of altruism, right? When it's not being done out of altruism. And we have to look at that from different points of view, because it sometimes can be hard to see what was done out of altruism and being authentic, and what was done to get a feeling out of you, or to get a feeling or a thought, or for you to feel a certain way about the other person. All these things are very important, right? And it can be hard to delineate, especially if we've never experienced it, and even more so if we don't know what we're really dealing with. So stay tuned. I have some more tips and tricks for you to identify and understand love bombing, and this will help you to be able to see it, and spot it as it's coming towards you, because we want to minimize the emotional and mental impact that it has to keep you afloat, keep you feeling good, and keep you, focus on your purpose, but also finding people around you that make you happy, you make them happy. But, I don't really necessarily agree that you have to be happy to begin with, but you bring happiness into their life. They bring happiness into your life. You're happy based on yourself, not on other people or how they feel or what they get you or any of the relationship stuff, but being able to have that type of relationship that lasts the test of time, whether it's a friendship, a work relationship, or even a romantic other relationship. So stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I've been discussing love bombing, what it looks like, what love bombing is, how to know if you're being love bombed, how it feels when you're being love bombed, and how it feels when you're not. And when you're not being love bombed, it's the opposite feeling, right? I mean, when you're not being love bombed, what have I done? What happened? Especially when somebody was love bombing you for so long, you're trying to get them to do that again. You're wondering what you've done wrong, and you start augmenting and changing yourself to do that. And it's not even conscious usually, because we don't really even know that we're being love bombed, right? So it's not a conscious awareness that this person is doing that. And it's also a conscious awareness. It's not a conscious awareness that you're augmenting and changing yourself, right? Changing yourself to get back on that pedestal. Because for the most part, the pedestal feels pretty good, right? In the past, it felt really great. Wow, this is awesome. I've never had a relationship where somebody cared this much, took care of me this much, was there for me this much, showered me with gifts and love and expressions of this and that. Oh my goodness. I mean, even a friendship. Wow, I've never had a friendship like this where somebody's constantly talking me up, doing this and that, and eventually all of a sudden it goes away, right? It's like, whoa, what happened here? And it really is psychological, where you start saying, gosh, what have I done? Maybe I've done something wrong. We start questioning ourselves. And then if the person starts telling us that we've done something wrong, even if we don't think we have, we start trying to augment or change or try to be everything for that person, right? And that becomes very interesting, because we start losing ourselves to get back on that pedestal. We start losing that ourselves to get back into the love bombing phase. And more often than not, the love bombing phase is off. It's gone. It's ended. There's occasions of having what I would consider crumbs, where somebody is giving you a few things here and there, but honestly, we make it out to be a big deal because we want to think that way. We want to have the relationship back the way it was, but in reality, it's crumbs. And oftentimes we can stay around in a relationship like that thinking, okay, things are going to get better, kind of almost in a holding pattern, believing this and not realizing that we're dealing with this big elephant in the room, right? We're dealing with the love bombing. We're dealing with the pedestal. We're dealing with being devalued, even discarded. Some people go through that process of the discard where they get love bombed and it's so amazing. And then over time, as it begins to wane, eventually the person finds all the faults in that person that they were love bombing. And then the person that's been love bombed, is trying to get back on that pedestal and not even knowing it, and doing all this thing for this person and doing everything they can. And they're trying to, impress that person or explain to them, or trying to, do whatever they can to get that person to see them and recognize them like they did before. And then over time, that person, disregards them and discards them. And that can be really overwhelming, because you can't really make heads or tail of it. What happened? How did this happen? How did this relationship go from being so perfect to the situation. As we know, nothing is perfect, but it can be hard to spot that, especially when we want that, right? It can be very challenging to spot that when we want that, because quite honestly, most of us want a relationship where the other person cares about us. We want a relationship where the other person's interested in what we're doing. We want a relationship where, the person, goes out of their way to do things for us that is nice. We want somebody to maybe get us a gift or two here and there. It's something that is nice, but there's also an element of how much of this is healthy and how much of this is not. And in the love bombing stage, it's not healthy. In the love bombing stage, we're at such an excessive amount. It's very hard to see because it is so excessive, right? It's very hard to see. And so it's like, okay, it can be hard. It can be hard to spot, though, because why? Because of our own self, because of what we actually want, right? Our desires and what we want can get in the way of our truth. The desires and what we want can get in the way of being able to see something as healthy or not healthy. And, those are the things that we need to really be aware of. And sometimes when folks are so accustomed to the love bombing, when it's being pulled away, they start giving and giving and giving of themselves. And maybe they start pulling back from family and friends. Maybe they start pulling back from their other responsibilities, making that person that's been love bombing them their sole priority, focusing on them constantly. And then they begin to lose themselves, right, in the process, as that person begins to wane and devalue the person that's being love bombed. So the love bomber devalues the other person, and over time continues to devalue. And most of the time, those folks are left, picking up the pieces. What happened? How did this get to this level? How did I let this relationship get there? How did this happen? What do I do next to get this person back? And so if you step back and you're feeling like you've been in a relationship like this, if you step back and you start wondering, wow, okay, I guess I have been being love bombed. Wow. I mean, start looking at it, the gifts, the attention, the over amount of attention, the over amount of text, the over amount of calls, the over amount of FaceTime, the over amount of being with that person all the time, 24/7. Look at that for real, because there's a healthy level of interaction and there's a level of not healthy. There's a level of, wow, this is kind of excessive, but we're overlooking it because of how we're feeling because of this person's actions. We're overlooking it because of this person, going out of the way with all these lavish trips and gifts and that sort of thing. And it can be hard because if you haven't been given things throughout your life, you can be very susceptible to this. If you haven't gotten a lot of attention in life and relationships, you can be, you can be a prey for this because it's painful, because it's giving you exactly what you want, but for all the wrong reasons, right? So, we might want that, and we might have wanted that forever, but it's for all the wrong reasons. It's setting us up to fail. It's setting us up to question our validity. It's setting us up to feel like how do you pick up the pieces when this is over? Because it goes from such an extreme, right? And so that's something that I just want you to connect with. If you feel like you're being love bombed, think about this. Listen to this show a couple of times. We have other videos and such on love bombing, right? So if you look on my YouTube channel, the interesting part is we discuss a lot of stuff on YouTube, which is awesome. We just started a TikTok. And we will put that link in the description as well. And we also have other podcasts on love bombing as well and what that is, and also on the pedestal phase. And this can really help you to really think about, okay, hey, this is happening to me. I'm realizing it. I'm seeing, I've been put on the pedestal. I'm also recognizing and realizing that I've been wanting to get back on the pedestal. I'm also seeing that this person is devaluing me. Right? And that's the thing too, is that the love bombing phase, you can do no wrong. You're perfect. You are their soulmate. You're this, you're that. But eventually they begin to devalue you. Right? They devalue you. And their devaluation is, you've done this wrong or you've done this wrong. And they find the faults in you. All the faults in you. All the faults. And that's painful. And then you try to make it up to them. Like you're making it up to them. I mean, like you can't. There's nothing, can't make it up to them. You start to make it up for them, and then all of a sudden you get back on that pedestal and you feel like you've done your job, and then the pedestal time begins to get shorter and shorter and shorter, and eventually the pedestal time is non-existent anymore. And so this is the thought process, this is the pattern, and I just want you to be aware of that. And so I'm adding the links in the description below to any video content and other podcast content that I think can be very helpful for you to explore when you're dealing with the situation. We want as much information we can possibly gain and get to be able to make that right decision and to be able to really see things clearly, right? Because that's what life is. Every experience that we're in shows us more about ourselves, right? Every experience that we find ourselves in educates us about ourselves. And that's what is so important in these relationships, is to be able to learn about ourselves and also learn how to protect ourselves, learn how to safeguard ourselves, and make sure that we're in the appropriate relationship that's healthy for us. And if it's not healthy, we need to learn a lesson and learn that lesson and take that to heart and move forward. I don't think it is a waste of time, but I feel that if we do it over and over and over again, that begins to be a waste of time, and we lose out on other opportunities that we could have to learn and grow. Please share this podcast with anybody that you feel needs this information. And there's probably somebody out there that does. And it's always good. It's like we can introduce people to people. We can help people find things, but we can also introduce them to content, helpful, knowledgeable content that can really help them to see their lives clearly, but to help them to make successful decisions and successful choices. If you haven't already, go check out my YouTube channel when you get a free moment. Go to YouTube, put in Ashley, Berges, Ashley, Berges, and you can find new video content every week, as well as I have a new membership site on my website. All you have to do is go to the website. We'll put the link in the description as well. And you can click on that and you can become a member for free even. And then if you would like to watch some content that is not available anywhere else, it's a very small monthly fee. And then we also have access to live Q&As with me every month. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I would love to have you, and I'd love to have the opportunity to see you and to communicate with you. So check out the membership option portal and the Ashley Burgess website today when you get a chance. Thanks for tuning in. If you have an idea or concept for a show that you would like to talk to me about, or perhaps you've gone through a very stressful relationship, you were able to get out on the other side unscathed, and you are able to tell the tale, and you would like to be on the radio with me, definitely reach out. Go to ashleyburgess.com, click on that contact page, and I will get back to you ASAP. In the meantime, don't forget to live your true life.